So, we are talking Dayton Leroy Rogers, named as one of the worst serial killers in the U.S. history, especially Oregon history. August 31st, 1987, a hunter randomly comes across in the woods a badly decomposing body. It was on a steep, brushy slope of a privately owned timber farm, 10 miles south of Molalla, Oregon. Over the next 5 days, the county sheriff's office came out and searched the area and found 6 more bodies badly decomposing, all women, all nude, along the same exact hillside, less than 100 yards from each other. And they were soon calling the Molalla Forest murders the worst serial murder in Oregon history. And I have to add that, there were several of these women missing their feet. Their feet were cut off, and one of them in particular had a cut going all the way up, like their body, their torso. That was the one that was the worst mutilated. So, 3 weeks prior to this discovery, Dayton Lee Rogers, 33 at the time, was arrested on August 7th due to a 911 call because of screams by a Jennifer Lisa Smith at a parking lot of a restaurant in Oak Grove. So the people in that restaurant, neighbors, heard somebody screaming the R word. Screaming it. And help, help, help. And there's 2 guys in particular who, I think one of them was even in a wheelchair, if I'm remembering right from the documentary I watched on this, who raced out there, and they found her with a guy over the top of her, and, she was badly injured, okay? And one thing Dayton Leroy Rogers did was he stabbed, he tried to cut pieces of them off, literally while alive and tied up. So they go to try to help her. One of the guys immediately starts doing CPR and trying to assist her. And another guy sees a truck speeding off, and he chases that truck.
Whoa.
And he couldn't quite catch up to him, but he got close enough to get a license plate number, and then he comes back to the crime scene where, unfortunately, Jennifer Lisa Smith had been declared dead by authorities that had arrived there, but he was able to give the authorities the license plate number. So they track him down to a small engine repair business that Rogers lived at with his wife, Sherry, and son, which I think was very little at that point. Very little son, in Woodburn, Oregon. So they talked to him. He had an alcohol problem, which apparently he appeared to have been drinking when they arrived. He seemed like he had been drinking, but not like wasted drunk or anything. They talked to him. Everything seems odd. He says he hadn't been anywhere that night, and one of the officers touches his truck, and it feels how hot it is. He's like, well, somebody was driving this truck and really driving it, the assumption basically they made was that somebody had been speeding and driving a long way in it because of how hot it was. It was like super hot.
Interesting.
I don't know if how hot a car is means that it was driving for a long time. Do you know? Or going faster just because it's super hot?
I don't think so. I mean, a car gets up to optimal temperature
and it stays
quick.
That.
Yeah.
But it is an indication of this. It was just used.
Yes. So
they're like, well, where did you go? Your truck was just used. Well, I just went to go get a coffee. Eventually they decide, there's some weird stuff here. Apparently, they searched a little wood-burning stove in his shop, and they found like all these little metal bits of things, like buttons, like little things, like just weird things. They were mementos from victims. Like, one of them was like little, I think, flower things off of a lady's jeans that were metal. Weird.
He kept them in there because they were metal?
Yeah.
Weird.
Like, it's
That's
like...
kind of smart, actually.
It's like jewelry, so it was jewelry...
Because it couldn't melt and would be safe.
Right. And people wouldn't really typically look in ashes.
Yeah.
Which
Whoa.
I guess you kind of... I would consider... Like, Rex Heuermann burned things in his backyard. I think I would consider checking ashes, because what is the easiest way to try to get rid of something? It is to burn it. And sometimes not every piece of it burns. Like jewelry, like metal bits of somebody's clothes. Like, think about your jeans, the rivets and jeans and stuff. They arrest him, actually, that night on, the murder of Jennifer Lisa Smith. And they look into his past. And his past, let me tell you, is not very good. So he had a history of sadistic crimes against women. And let's go back to the beginning of Dayton Leroy Rogers. So interesting. We hear this Rogers name again. And Papa Rogers.
Yeah.
Elliot Rogers. Well, Dayton Leroy Rogers was the youngest of 3 kids born in Moscow, Idaho in 1954. His parents apparently moved a lot and adopted a lot of kids, like, along the way.
Okay.
And apparently his father was pretty abusive, like, for seemingly no reason, like one of those abusive people that just has outbursts and abuses you, like, for no apparent reason.
Oh, that's weird and unfortunate for him.
Yeah, and he ended up becoming like a juvenile crime, like
delinquent.
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah, juvenile delinquent. I was trying to think of that word. So in 7th grade, he was arrested for shooting a BB gun at passing cars. And then within his teen years, he actually stabbed a 15-year-old girl in the chest, and she survived. So It was 1972. He drove his girlfriends into the woods for sex. And I don't really understand the reason behind this, okay? Apparently just randomly, like, they're having a good time, he just leans over and starts stabbing her with a hunting knife in her abdomen and chest. And she asked him why he did it, and he said it's because he couldn't trust her anymore. But they were, like, having a good time. It's really weird. But you know what she did? She literally, with stab wounds in her, manipulates and convinces him to take her to the hospital. And promises she won't, like, rat on him. But the hospital doesn't believe her story. And eventually she fesses up and she tells the cops. Right. So he ended up pleading to second-degree assault in 1973. And he got 4 years probation.
I would have been scared if I was her.
This is another person who just seemed to keep escaping law enforcement or getting off on minor, like, almost like a minor infraction for something that is not a minor infraction. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that should be a felony there.
It should be a felony
assault.
And prison time, not 4 years probation. So a year after that, he attacks 2 15-year-old girls with a pop bottle, a soda bottle. And he gets second and third degree assault charges, and he was acquitted by reason of mental illness or defect, the Oregon equivalent to insanity. And he was committed to a state hospital and got released literally a year later. And get this. The lady who signed off on his release said, like, yes, he's good to go, okay? All the nice things, he's good to go. But then within her notes, she put he was a danger to society. But he was still released.
Yeah, because she said he's good to go.
But then, well, in my notes, I put that he was like a danger to society and hadn't changed at all. And when I asked him, she said something like, when I asked him if he regretted anything about, what his actions before, he just said, well, next time I just won't get caught, or I'll learn how to hide it better, or I'll make sure there's no witnesses, something like that. I think he said, I'll make sure there's no witness next time.
Gosh.
Yeah, and he still gets let out. Like, that just irks me. And that's honestly why the Jeremy Best situation bothers me too. Like, I feel like nowadays we shouldn't have that ability to let out somebody who is a harm to others and themselves. Like, we should be smarter than that by now. You know what I mean? And money shouldn't matter. People's lives matter more than money. So yeah, he has this long history of this, and then he moves on to prostitutes, okay? He ends up getting out, and he gets married and has his kid, and that's almost like a cover for him, honestly, in his mechanic shop, because he did get like some training while he was in jail for another girl's assault, and that was basically his cover, and he specifically targeted prostitutes. Now, I heard that the reason he did is because his father, the abusive one growing up, kind of set this idea in his head that men can do whatever they want to women. And growing up, he had an obsession with his sister's feet. To the point that he pleasured himself to his sister's feet. Okay, well, that's just some weird fetish stuff. Yeah, well, that's why he cut the women's feet off. And some of the survivors of this man, the sex workers of this man, literally said that they would get in the car, okay, that he would tell them what he wanted. He wanted to tie them up and everything, but not tell them about the whole cutting you up part. And then would start literally actively like cutting or biting those areas while they're like they're there. They're like alive. And he's like trying to cut off their foot.
Yeah, it sounds horrible. Sounds awful.
And based off of that is how cops started being like, oh, these victims that we found deceased that have their feet cut off, this was probably done to them while they were alive, because it happened to this girl who survived him, that he tried cutting off her freaking foot. And one girl...
Such a weird thing.
I know. And one girl that survived him, the one that had she had a scar on her leg from him trying to cut off her foot. They asked her, like, well, why did he let you go if he was to that point of trying to cut off your foot? And she's like, well, I didn't really react. She said, I just sat there, when it was happening. And I think he asked her some kind of question, like, like, what's going on with you? Like, you don't care that I'm trying to cut off your foot? Like, something, like, checked in with her, and she was like, Yeah, she's like, I understand where I am, like, in this forest, and I know if I scream, nobody's gonna help me. She's like, you're gonna kill me anyway, so just get it over with already. Nobody cares if I live or die. And he was like, all right, screw this. You don't care enough.
Jeez. That's so strange, but it makes sense.
He literally let her go because she didn't care if she lived or died.
Yeah, it makes sense because it's the power and control.
Exactly. That's what he was addicted to.
I think that's what every one of them are addicted to.
Which is what we were talking about earlier with like how serial killing is an addiction.
Yeah. Yep.
They're literally addicted to the power and control, and that can either come from the act of killing or what happens before that. Because for some of them, it is not about the killing. That's not what's important.
Yep. It's the stalking.
It's the stalking, and it's what they do to the person once they have them, but the killing is just to get rid of them. But yeah, the victims range from like 15, 16, 26, 35. It's really sad, but here's the thing, is he ended up he gets arrested, we're back up to speed in the current time where, Jennifer Lisa Smith, he's going to court for her death, okay? Because he got arrested, he gets charged and everything, and he ends up going the route of saying that he killed her out of self-defense.
What?
Yeah. And that he picked her up, okay, and she was a prostitute, a sex worker, and they get in the car. He tells her he would like to bondage her, and she says okay, and they get started, and for some reason he looks away or does something or goes out to like maybe go pee, I don't know, and then when he gets back in or turns around, she has slipped off one of her restraints and got into the glove box where he had a knife and said, "Give me," and puts it up to his neck and says, "Give me all your money." And he was like, I don't know, there was some kind of altercation. She ends up getting out.
It's the bias to prostitute.
Exactly. That's what he was using against them.
Yep.
And then she gets out somehow and runs away, and he chases her down and stabs her. Like that. You just disproved your own statement that it was self-defense. Because if she got out and ran, you were now the pursuer.
Yeah.
You are not defending yourself anymore. You're chasing her.
Yeah.
So stupid.
And he got off?
No, he did not get off.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, geez.
But that man is still alive now. He got the death sentence. And he got, so he had the trial for Jennifer, and then he has a trial for the other victims. He gets convicted to death for everything, and then he got his death sentence overturned, like literally for multiple times. Like multiple of these victims, he gets it overturned. But the jury still came back every time and said, you are absolutely guilty and you are going to be in prison for life. Okay? So he's still in prison and alive, but it's...
Jeez.
It's interesting.
So how many victims does he have? Did it give you the total?
There's only 7 known.
Okay.
Maybe 8, actually. Maybe 8 known. But I have seen that because of that little stove, remember we talked about the wood-burning stove?
Yep.
Well, apparently with how much jewelry and like pieces of the metal bits from people's clothing and stuff was found in that stove, apparently it was so much that they think there's no way that that's the actual number. They think that it's more. And apparently all 7 of the victims that were found in the forest all happened in a 2-month time time period.
Geez.
So he went from being an assaulter. We talked about the 15-year-old girlfriend. We talked about the other two 15-year-olds a year later. Then there's another one and another one. Like he does, but those were years apart. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was a progression there, and they had some time between them. And there's even the time where he's trying to get his life together, and he goes to church and gets married, and his wife was a super religious person, and it gave him the benefit of the doubt every time until she couldn't anymore because it was apparent that he was the killer and got arrested. You know, like she trusted him and believed him every time he said he was going out to like work in the shop, and then he would wait till she was asleep and then go out and do this every night, you know. But he got to a point where he went into this, like, what do they call it? A blood frenzy or something? There's some official name for it, actually, where, like, it's almost... I heard it described as the killers almost go into a state of, like, if they can't kill, they almost have, like, these physical symptoms they can't get rid of until they kill. Like, in his case, it was supposedly a headache he couldn't get rid of. And when he would do the killing, he would feel better. Really strange how the mind works, man.
Yeah.
Really, really strange.
Well, the mind makes up physical symptoms all the time.
Yeah. So I thought it was interesting that he was from Moscow, Idaho. And I don't... Now, he did use, like, a knife, but he also used, like, a hacksaw on, you know, cutting off the feet. But... do you think there's any possible way, like, isn't that weird, Papa Rogers? And, like, this is one serial killer from Moscow, Idaho, who's, like, notorious. Now, he did move to Oregon, okay, and do all this in Oregon, but he was literally born in Moscow, Idaho. That just seems so strange to me. And for his last name to be Rogers. Now, unlike Elliot Rogers and Papa Rogers, it is spelt the normal way.
Yeah.
Where it's just Rogers.
What? It's Glenn?
Dayton Leroy Rogers.
Oh, okay.
Who's that?
Just
it's another killer.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, it's 7 to 8 victims. Yeah, it says right here, but he is in Clackamas County, Oregon. I believe that's where he's being held now. But yeah.
Yeah,
really,
that is crazy stuff.
Really, really weird. Really weird.
What's interesting is there's like 4 or 5 Rogers serial killers. The last call killer was last named Rogers. The cross country killer is last named Rogers. The Casanova killer is last name Rogers. Then you have Papa Rogers. Like, jeez. Mr. Roger.
That's super weird. I mean, Roger, I guess, is kind of a common name. Is that why? Because it's just a common, like, white people name in America?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't think I ever knew any Roger. First name Roger or last name Roger.
I have known a first name Roger, but not a last name Roger.
Yeah. Strange.
And that's literally only one person ever in my whole life that I've known that had the name Roger in first or last name. One.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting. But, you know, if you guys noticed anything within this that you feel like is relevant at all, the only relevant thing I could find is that he's a serial killer from Moscow, Idaho, and it's kind of weird.
And used the knife.
Mm-hmm. Was obsessed with women, sex workers, obsessed with feet, you know.
Yeah.
A fetish, like Kohberger's tickling fetish. Just kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, it is like a real fetish tickling, but that's...
Yeah, it is.
Not saying he had that fetish, but, yep, just let me know what you think about the case of Dayton Lee Rogers from Moscow, Idaho. Case closed.
closed and locked.